Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, December 26th, 2022. Happy holidays, or merry belated Christmas. I apologize for not uploading for the past few days. I didn't want to upload on Christmas or Christmas Eve, so I decided to postpone this video until today. I normally do a more comical, joking style video for the holidays, but this time around I decided to spend the day with family and decided against it. But I will return to some level of comedic content probably on the 1st of April and other days maybe. But beyond that, I think we are starting to get really deep into the 2024 discussion with the New Hampshire primary potentially being moved as early as February, with a move from the DNC to change that, with discussions about who's going to be running for president, with discussions about Joe Biden's potential, or maybe not, re-election bid. We also can talk about the Republican and Trump allies that were under the Trump administration or very closely related to it that have now turned on him for a 2024 presidential bid. You see, the issue with Donald Trump running for re-election is that this will be the third consecutive time that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee for president. With Joe Biden in the way and Democrats expanding control of the Senate with Republicans with a narrow House majority, Republicans aren't exactly hopeful for the next 2 years. And should they lose 2024, they probably won't be hopeful for years beyond that. And there's a lot of thinking and a lot of reasoning that goes into it, largely in part that Democrats are slated to potentially regain control of the House in 2024 should a slightly better national environment come their way, all around. That doesn't exactly tell the GOP that in any way they should be confident about their future. And with a former losing presidential candidate, Donald Trump comes into 2024 in a way the front runner, but also the front loser, at least to Joe Biden. Looking at our preliminary polls for 2024, Donald Trump leads the bunch by about 18 points on average, but his grip has been weakening over the past couple of weeks. You can see a clear and consistent drop-off and trend here, where there is an increase in support for Governor Ron DeSantis from the state of Florida, with the most recent poll showing Donald Trump winning by just 5 points across the country, with Ron DeSantis well within striking distance. Beyond that, there are plenty of other polls, such as the one from YouGov and Yahoo News that was done on December 19th that showed on the national level, Donald Trump leads by 2 points against DeSantis, Haley, Pence, Cheney, Youngkin, etc. But in a head-to-head matchup, Ron DeSantis defeats Trump. And you can see this in many other polls as well. Donald Trump typically leads, but there are a bunch of polls showing that Ron DeSantis would defeat him, whether on a statewide basis or on a national basis, which should be quite worrisome. And looking at the 2024 discussion, I've decided to go through these allies, these main figureheads for the 2016 Trump campaign or the 2017 through 2021 Trump White House that should have been easy turnarounds for the 2024 bid, should have been people that Donald Trump should have been able to tap on their shoulders and say, hey, endorse me in this race, and they would have obliged. Maybe that was the case before the insurrection. Maybe that was the case before COVID-19. Maybe that was the case before he lost the 2020 presidential election. But now it is clear that there are plenty of top Republicans, whether outspoken or not, that do not support him in 2024. But amongst those outspoken, you have some top names. We start off with Attorney General Bill Barr, who was the Attorney General under President Donald Trump, someone who was viewed to be one of his closest allies in 2019, 2020, someone who was meant to be there for him through the election, through impeachment, through everything. At the end of the day, he was an ally of Trump. He stayed with him for a significant portion of that campaign. But then you look at his comments about Donald Trump being a potential nominee. He says, among the current crop of potential nominees, Trump is the person least able to unite the party and the one most likely to lose the general election. And I think that perfectly sums up Donald Trump's campaign in a nutshell. His own vice president, Mike Pence, who used to be extremely loyal to him, this term ultra loyal is an underestimation of how Mike Pence was so closely and engrossed under Donald Trump. But after January 6th, after shifting the blame of the loss of the election onto him, Mike Pence has turned away from him. And he says now that Donald Trump's words and actions on January 6th were reckless, and said that the president's words that day at the rally endangered me and my family and everyone at the Capitol. Mike Pence has also continued to rail against him, whether directly or not, through proxy wars. You can find this in the Arizona governor race. You can find this in areas where Mike Pence had a contentious primary opponent pick, meaning that he chose someone Donald Trump did not in the primary, and the primary ended up being contested. And it was this battle between establishment traditional conservatives like Mike Pence and the outspoken, non-politically correct Republicans like Donald Trump. And the problem was that Mike Pence at the time didn't have as large of a base, and even now he still doesn't. But there is still a section of the Republican Party that treats his word as a very, very valuable point of view, sees Mike Pence as this judger of character, and if he's turning against his own president, it also says something there as well. Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, who is actually exploring a potential presidential bid in 2024, originally from the state of Montana, represented Montana's at-large congressional district. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you will remember in late 2017, we talked about that that general election with Greg Gianforte, but who is now the governor of Montana. But Mike Pompeo, who is potentially running in 2024, seems to have been, going against President Trump, saying after the midterms that we were told we get tired of winning. That is a clear reference to Donald Trump. But I'm tired of losing, and so are most Republicans. Remember how Donald Trump said that after that election and even going into it, you'll get so tired of winning, we will win election after election. Well, 2018 came around, you lost. 2020 came around, you lost. 2022 came around, you lost. And now 2024 is coming around, and Donald Trump is still losing to a president who can't even keep his approval rating over water. And I don't say that as a bash on Joe Biden. I don't say that as a bash on Trump being unable to beat him. But what I'm telling you is that on the surface level, if we were to take away all types of understanding about the midterms, about these candidates, and we said you have a president who hasn't been above water since summer of his first year in office, that honeymoon period he has never recovered from, is disapproved of nationwide by nearly double digits, and yet a candidate who only lost the last election by 44,000 votes can't come back, can't even gain control of his own party, because that's how ununifying he is, can't beat this guy in a general election. I mean, the midterm elections were cataclysmic. That on paper looked abysmal. It was abysmal, and everybody felt it that night. Everybody felt it that night, and that's exactly what Mike Pompeo is saying here. But I think all of these understandings and discussions about Trump are correct. You find it here, too, with Chris Christie, who says that Donald Trump is dragging down the GOP. I mean, Chris Christie was floated as a potential VP pick for Donald Trump. We knew here that Chris Christie was going to be a big proponent of Trump. But after, and even going into 2022, after the 2020 election, Chris Christie flipped. He realized that Trump was going to try to run again. Chris Christie probably is floating another bid in 2024, and he says that Donald Trump is dragging down the GOP. And I think that, there's going to be a lot of discussion about it. And it says here on ABC News, and I think also this is quite a comical quote, we all remember in 2016, he said if he got elected, there was going to be so much winning and winning and winning and winning, they'd get sick of winning. None of us at the time knew he was actually talking about the Democrats. Now, that's funny. I would have laughed at that if I saw it on TV. But, that also, again, is the understanding from Republicans across this country. Donald Trump's what now many people view as a fluke victory was not this shift in national narrative, this shift in national sentiment. Democrats have won every election since then on the top lines. They lost the House in 2022, but at the expense of the GOP losing an additional seat in the Senate, losing seats in the governorships, Democrats flipping state legislatures, winning states like Michigan for the first time in decades, trifectaing many states, flipping states like Arizona that Biden won by less than half a point in 2020. This is an accurate quote. That measly House majority, which Democrats, to be quite fair, had just as much of a measly House majority, which is why we knew it was going to flip. No matter what I said it was going to flip, there was nothing there that would have changed my mind. Maybe if I saw the elections ahead of time, I would have said, okay, maybe there's a slim shot here, but Democrats were never really going to be maintaining control of the House, and they didn't, obviously. Right? Because that majority was so slim, but it's the same case with the GOP, so I'm going to treat it as such when we talk about that. You can see Stephanie Grisham, who was the press secretary who resigned after the Capitol riot. You see her on a lot of news television. John Bolton, former national security advisor, who says that Trump's second term would be, quote, unacceptable. Donald Trump's closest allies are turning on him, and now many of them, hey, hold on a second, are not only saying no to Trump, but yes to themselves. They're saying no to Trump because many of them want to run in 2024. And of those who have publicly expressed interest, think about the people on that list that we just talked about that, right? John Bolton, who went after Trump, he's on this list. Liz Cheney, who went after Trump, she's on this list. Chris Christie, same deal, right? You have Larry Hogan, same deal. Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, all of these people who were at one point in time very close with Donald Trump, or at least were not against him, now are against him, now are making a decision, and you are finding that many of these people, even with Donald Trump being in the race, are now exploring these bids. And amongst those potential candidates, I can only imagine that there will be more and more and more and more and more of these top names throwing their hat into the rings or attacking Trump before they announce their bids, because they need to separate themselves from him. Otherwise, they look as if they're just running to continue his legacy. Why run to continue a legacy of someone who was already in the race instead of just endorsing them? Nikki Haley said, "I will not run if Trump runs." Well, it looks like that sentiment has changed, and largely in part because we have seen that, that the Democrats did well in 2022. Let me see if I can find the article about Nikki Haley here, because it says a decision is expected to be received in early 2023. She's talking about this possibility at running, but we remember that she said, if Trump is running, that I will not run in this election. She said that on record. Now, that doesn't mean she has to hold to it, but it will look bad. And many of these other candidates that are now trying to distance themselves are also still going to look bad, because it is still a negative look to be serving under someone's administration, to be literally their vice president or their senior advisor or their secretary of state or their UN ambassador or their biggest proponent in the Senate, and then turn around and run against them. I think 2024 is going to be an election where we will see what a fractured party can or cannot do in the general election. The limitations of the Republican Party will be on full force and full display. Because looking at the approval rating of Biden, looking at the discussion around 2024, it is evident here that there is no clear consensus as to which party is leading. And the reason why that's a bad look is because at this point in time, 4 years ago, there was a clear consensus that Donald Trump was going to lose. There was a clear understanding that someone with an approval rating similar to Joe Biden's could not win re-election. Because 2018 proved us that. 2020 then confirmed that belief. But now 2022 has thrown everything awry, including a potential re-election bid for Donald Trump. It would be one thing if 2022 went in the way of the GOP in a positive way. Right? If 2022 went to the Republicans, they flipped control of the House by 30, they picked up 2-3 seats in the Senate, Donald Trump would have a mandate. He will say, I put Dr. Oz in the Senate, I put Herschel Walker in the Senate, I put Blake Masters in the Senate. I flipped those House seats. John Gibbs, that was me, right? Getting rid of these rhinos, that was me. Getting rid of all of these people, and what that would have built for Donald Trump was a very strong campaign. Many people would have said immediately after that election, riding on a high, okay, we're all going into leadership positions, presidential campaign is underway, and they would have jumped onto Trump's campaign. A lot of the Republicans that have not endorsed yet would have jumped on his campaign. Because looking at the endorsements that we see, Ron DeSantis is nearly on par with Donald Trump with national figures that are endorsing. Ron DeSantis has a sitting U.S. senator. So does Donald Trump. Just one each. In terms of what we see overall, sure, Donald Trump has a lot of endorsements from U.S. representatives, but beyond that, you're really struggling to see where a lot of the support is coming from. You have someone from Virginia's Senate election or the New Jersey Assembly or some well-known individuals, but beyond that, what else do you see? The problem is this isn't like 2016. This, quite frankly, is far from 2020, which means these people need to make a decision, and some of them have even declined to endorse. Donald Trump's biggest adversary, Tucker Carlson, who decided that he was not going to endorse in this race. How fascinating. How fascinating that Donald Trump can't even get the endorsement from Tucker Carlson. I just realized I misspoke earlier on in the video. Someone's going to comment it. I'll put a pinned comment. Mike Pompeo is not from Montana. It was another guy from Montana. Who is it? He was Secretary of State for a very limited time. Maybe it wasn't him. Oh, Ryan Zinke, right? He was Secretary of State. Maybe he wasn't. I don't know why I thought Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo, was he Kansas's 4th district? Was that James Thompson, 2017? Let me check. Sorry, I'm going a bit off on a tangent here. I want to see what yes, 4th district. Okay, I remember that race quite vividly. I just remember Secretary of State with Montana. Don't know why. To be fair, Mike Pompeo sounds like he's from Montana, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. But, whatever. Okay, moving on back to the original plot of the story. So Donald Trump now being floated as this name, this big name again, obviously is something that we should have expected and should have gone into knowing this from the start. And I think we have. I think we have been able to understand that. The GOP, on the other hand, doesn't seem to be able to put their finger on it, or at least figure out what they need to do. I think with all this consideration about other people running against him, they run the risk of being a repeat 2016. What I mean by that is, without a consolidated effort against Trump, he wins the plurality and wins the primary. Without just shifting all your support to Ron DeSantis, DeSantis doesn't win. And I think, when you split the vote, when you keep these top contenders, Rubio, Kasich, Cruz, you build up this coalition that is inherently anti-Trump, but doesn't vote that way. Doesn't vote that way, at least smartly. Maybe won't vote for Trump, but doesn't consolidate. Do you remember that struggle between, maybe you don't, because, to be fair, I was 13. But if you remember the struggle between Cruz and Kasich in Ohio and other states, where they were telling each other, vote for this other candidate in another race, but then Kasich came out and said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go ahead and do that because if you support me, you should support me. I remember watching that on CNN. And I think that really was a moment where many people should have realized, and I think many people did realize, that the campaign was not winnable for anyone besides Trump. Without a consolidated effort against someone who can win in a primary system that is rigged for the plurality winner. And I mean that entirely honestly. South Carolina, one of the first ever primaries, look at this vote share for Trump and look at the delegate count. Every other candidate got 0, and Donald Trump got less than a third of the vote. That is a messed up system, at least democratically. The Republicans are free and fair to do whatever they want to. But objectively, this primary process is, in fact, in favor of the person who wins the plurality. And that's exactly how Donald Trump, even with many other candidates out of the race, ended up with less than 45% of the national popular vote, yet won the race by nearly 1,000 delegates over his second-place candidate, who received about 20% less than Donald Trump did in terms of the overall vote share. 25 versus 45 should not be the difference, 3-1. That is not how things should be in this system. But because it is set up that way, Donald Trump will take advantage of that. It's how he won the race in the past, and without a consolidated effort, this unified front against Trump really just means everybody is pro themselves. Nikki Haley, Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, all of these people want to pursue the presidency, and they see Donald Trump as a roadblock. So in a way, that's not good news for Trump. But in another way, it is. It's a double-edged sword that Republicans need to figure out internally. Otherwise, they run the risk of renominating Trump again. And as said best by Bill Barr, he is the most likely to lose the general election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.